Right, so I'm going to go over how I went about solving assignment 4. There's obviously more than one way to do it, but just to review, basically what we're doing is we're keeping track of attendance records. And so each attendance record is going to have a student name and a G number. There's some validation for the G number. And the attendance record records for that particular student the total number of classes during the semester that they attended. And so we have this menu structure where we can create, remove, increment the attendance, or increment all the attendance, or display the attendance. So that's basically what we have. So I'll show you how I solved it. All right, so I basically have two classes. I have attendance record and attendance record implementation. So attendance record is going to be my data definition class. And if we go ahead and look at the variables, we see that we have name, G number, and days attended, which are the obvious ones. We have a static variable for keeping track of the number of attendance records. So basically, I'm going to use that to keep track of the number of attendance record objects that we've instantiated. Okay. And then I have this constant here, maximum days, because the assignment specified that a student can only have attended 35 days maximum for each semester. So that's why that's there. So I only have one constructor. This constructor accepts a name and a G number. It calls the setters. It sets the days attended to 0. And it increments this static variable num records. So in other words, anytime this constructor is called, that's when num records gets incremented. So with that, I can keep track of the exact number of attendance record objects that I have instantiated at any given time. So that's what that variable is for. Okay, and oops. I've got my getters, get name, get number, get days attended, get num records. Those are all just very standard. My setters, so for name, I'm checking to make sure that it's not blank. Otherwise, I set it. For number, I'm also checking to make sure that it's blank. And I'm doing a validation. So remember, the validation is that a G number has to start with the capital letter G followed by 8 numbers. So I have this isValidNumber method that I've created. So I'll go over that in just a second. And if it makes it through all of those without throwing an exception, then I go ahead and actually set the G number to the variable that was passed in. Okay, and so here's my validation. My validation is not particularly complicated. First, I check to make sure that the length is 9, because it should be the letter G followed by 8 additional numbers, so that's a total of 9 characters. So if the length is anything other than 9, then I'm going to say it's not valid. Then I'm going to check the character at the first position. So char at 0 will give me the very, very first character of the passed-in string. And if it's not equal to a capital G, then I'm going to return false because the number is not valid. Then I'm going to loop from 1 to 9. So I don't need to loop from 0 because 0 is where the G is. So I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I'm going to grab the character at each position. So that's what char at I does. And then I'm going to check to see if it's a digit. And if it's not a digit, then I'm going to say it's not a valid number. If I make it through all of that without returning false, then I assume that it is valid, and so then I return true. So that's the validation. Okay, then I'm going to have this increment days attended. This is what I'm going to use in my implementation class to actually increment the days. And basically all I'm doing is I'm doing a check to make sure that if I increment the days, it doesn't go over the maximum. So in other words, if somebody has attended 32 days, then it'll say, all right, is 32 plus 1 greater than 35? No, it's not, so I'll go ahead and increment days attended. If days attended was already 35, then it would say, is 35 plus 1, 36, greater than 35? Yes, it is. I'm going to throw the exception saying that you've exceeded the max number of days, and then I'm not going to do this incrementation. So that's what the increment days attended is for. And then this decrease num records, this is to decrease the static variable for the number of records in the event that I remove an attendance record from my array. So if I remove an object from my array, I need to decrease the number of records that I actually have. So that's what this method is for. And then I just have a toString method that prints out information about my attendance record. So that's basically the attendance record class.